The humid Manila air clung to Manny Pacquiao's weathered face as he stepped through the airport's sliding glass doors. His simple white polo shirt, faded from countless washes, bore no designer labels or flashy logos. A worn leather duffel bag hung loosely from his shoulder, its corners softened by years of travel. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across the terminal floor, where hurried footsteps echoed against polished tiles. Flight announcements crackled through speakers in both English and Filipino, creating a symphony of modern chaos. Despite the bustling crowd, Manny moved with quiet purpose, his calloused hands gripping a crumpled boarding pass. The scent of fast food and cleaning chemicals mixed in the recycled air, a familiar cocktail of transit life. Young professionals in crisp suits rushed past him, their phones glued to their ears, discussing million-peso deals. Families with crying children struggled with oversized luggage, while uniformed airline staff glided through the terminal with practiced efficiency. Manny's eyes, still sharp from years of reading opponents in the ring, observed everything with patient calm. His footsteps were measured, deliberate, like a boxer conserving energy before a fight. A security guard nodded politely, but without recognition, seeing only another middle-aged Filipino traveler. The departure board flickered with destinations across Asia and beyond, each name representing dreams and journeys. In this sea of strangers, the greatest boxer in Philippine history walked unnoticed, carrying himself with the same humility that once lifted an entire nation. The check-in counter loomed ahead, staffed by two young women in pressed blue uniforms and perfect makeup. Their name tags gleamed under the terminal's bright lights: Maria Santos and Joyce Reyes, both fresh-faced and eager to prove their professionalism. Behind them, monitors displayed flight information in neat, orderly rows, while the mechanical hum of conveyor belts provided a steady soundtrack. Manny approached slowly, his flip-flops making soft sounds against the polished floor. The women were engaged in animated conversation about weekend plans, their voices mixing with the distant roar of jet engines. Neither looked up immediately, absorbed in their private world of schedules and small talk. The moment stretched like the seconds before a championship bell, pregnant with possibility and unaware of its significance. Manny cleared his throat gently, the same way he might have done before addressing the media after a hard-fought victory. His smile was genuine, carrying decades of gratitude for every person who had served him throughout his journey. "Good morning, miss," he said softly, his voice carrying the gentle accent of General Santos City. The boarding pass trembled slightly in his weathered hands, not from nervousness, but from the air conditioning's cold blast. Around them, the terminal continued its relentless pace. Travelers pulling suitcases and checking phones, oblivious to the quiet drama about to unfold. The two attendants finally looked up, their expressions polite but distant, trained to process passengers efficiently rather than truly see them. In that instant, Manny stood before them not as a legend, but simply as passenger 14A, requesting what his ticket promised. Maria Santos glanced at the boarding pass with practiced indifference, her manicured nails tapping against the counter's marble surface. The first-class ticket bore the name Manny Pacquiao, but the connection failed to register in her mind. "Sir, I'm sorry, but this seat has been upgraded to our premium passengers only," she announced with rehearsed authority. Her colleague Joyce nodded approvingly, both women assuming this simply dressed man had somehow acquired a ticket beyond his means. The computer screen glowed between them, showing seat 2A marked in bold red letters as occupied. Behind Manny, a line of impatient travelers began forming, their designer luggage and expensive watches creating an unspoken hierarchy. The air conditioning hummed overhead, creating an artificial chill that seemed to mirror the reception he was receiving. "But miss, I purchased this ticket properly," Manny replied gently, pulling out his phone to show the confirmation email. His voice remained calm, seasoned by years of facing hostile crowds in foreign arenas where respect had to be earned punch by punch. Maria barely glanced at the screen, instead consulting her supervisor through a quick whispered conversation that excluded Manny entirely. "Sir, our system shows this seat was reassigned to a VIP passenger," Joyce interjected, her tone suggesting the matter was beyond discussion. The sound of rolling suitcases and chattering voices filled the space around them, while departure announcements echoed through the terminal. Manny's weathered hands remained steady, though his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a fighter's instinct recognizing disrespect. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the counter, highlighting the growing tension in this everyday encounter. A businessman in an expensive suit approached the adjacent counter, receiving immediate smiles and deferential treatment from another attendant. His Rolex caught the light as he gestured casually, his first-class boarding pass processed without question or hesitation. The contrast was stark and deliberate, a silent commentary on perceived social status based purely on appearance and clothing brands. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our economy section, sir," Maria suggested, already printing a new boarding pass without waiting for consent. Her fingers moved efficiently across the keyboard, each keystroke sealing Manny's reassignment with bureaucratic finality. The printer's mechanical whir seemed unnaturally loud in the moment, drowning out any possibility of protest. Joyce smiled politely but coldly, her training evident in the way she maintained professional courtesy while delivering personal rejection. Manny accepted the economy boarding pass with a quiet nod, his dignity intact despite the obvious slight against his character. "Salamat," he said simply, thanking them in Filipino before stepping aside with the same grace he'd shown in defeat and victory. His flip-flops made soft sounds against the polished floor as he moved away from the counter, carrying himself like a champion who had faced far worse storms. Behind him, the two attendants returned to their previous conversation, already forgetting the encounter that would soon change their lives. The terminal's ambient noise swallowed the moment, unaware that history had just been rewritten at Gate 7. Other passengers continued their hurried preparations, blind to the quiet injustice that had unfolded before their eyes. In 43 minutes, their ignorance would transform into chaos, and respect would demand its rightful place in the conversation. Manny walked through the narrow aisle of the aircraft, his economy boarding pass clutched gently in his calloused hand. The cramped seats stretched before him in neat rows, filled with families, students, and working-class Filipinos heading to various destinations. His assigned seat, 32F, sat wedged between a middle window and a businessman already engrossed in his laptop screen. The cabin's recycled air carried the familiar sense of anticipation and mild anxiety that accompany air travel. Flight attendants moved efficiently through the aisles, their practiced smiles masking the routine nature of their work. Overhead compartments clicked shut with metallic finality as passengers settled into their purchased spaces. The contrast between this modest section and the first-class cabin he'd been denied was stark, but not unfamiliar. A young mother in the row behind struggled to quiet her fussing infant while balancing a diaper bag and bottle. Her tired eyes met Manny's briefly, and he offered an encouraging smile that seemed to ease her stress momentarily. "Excuse me, Kuya," she whispered, using the respectful Filipino term as she recognized something familiar in his weathered but kind face. The businessman beside Manny glanced up from his screen, his expression shifting from annoyance to curiosity as he studied his seatmate's profile. Two teenagers across the aisle began whispering excitedly, one discreetly pointing while the other frantically searched through photos on her phone. The recognition spread slowly, like ripples in still water, as more passengers began to realize they were sharing their flight with living legend. Their excitement was palpable, but respectful, understanding instinctively that this humble man deserved privacy despite his global fame. Hindi ba si Manny Pacquiao yan? The question floated through the cabin in hushed Filipino, spreading from row to row like wildfire. Passengers began turning in their seats, some boldly taking photos, while others simply stared in amazement and disbelief. The businessman closed his laptop entirely, extending his hand with sudden reverence. "Sir, it's an honor to meet you." Manny shook hands warmly with everyone who approached, his genuine warmth transforming the cramped economy section into something resembling a community gathering. Flight attendants paused in their duties, whispering among themselves as they recognized the 8-division world champion sitting in seat 32F. The cabin buzzed with excited energy, passengers sharing stories of watching his fights and how he'd brought pride to their nation. Even the crying baby seemed calmer, as if sensing the positive energy radiating from this unexpected celebrity passenger. The aircraft's engines roared to life, but the mechanical sound was overshadowed by the growing murmur of amazed conversations throughout the economy cabin. Passengers pulled out phones to text family members about their famous fellow traveler, while others simply sat in respectful silence, processing the surreal situation. "Idol, bakit kayo nandito sa economy?" a brave passenger asked, wondering why their national hero was seated among them instead of in first class. Manny's response was characteristically humble, deflecting attention from the slight he'd received at the check-in counter just minutes earlier. The businessman beside him shook his head in disbelief, muttering something about the airline's obvious mistake in seating arrangement. Social media posts began appearing as passengers shared photos and videos, their excitement infectious and rapidly spreading beyond the confines of the aircraft. Unknown to everyone aboard, these innocent posts would soon ignite a firestorm that would shake the airline industry. Sarah Martinez, a college student from Cebu, couldn't believe her luck as she sat 3 rows behind the boxing legend. Her fingers trembled slightly as she composed her Facebook post, choosing her words carefully to capture this incredible moment. "OMG, guys! Manny Pacquiao is on my flight, sitting in economy, while rich passengers took first class," she typed rapidly. The airplane's Wi-Fi connected just as they reached cruising altitude, and her post went live to her 2,000 followers instantly. Within minutes, hearts and shocked face emojis began flooding her notification feed as friends shared the post across their own networks. Screenshots spread like wildfire through Filipino social media groups, each share adding fuel to a growing digital storm. The small economy cabin had become ground zero for what would soon become a national conversation about respect and social hierarchy. Miguel Santos, an overseas worker returning from Dubai, recorded a short video showing Manny graciously taking selfies with fellow passengers. "Look at this, mga kababayan," he narrated in mixed English and Filipino, panning the camera across the humble champion surrounded by admiring Filipinos. His TikTok account had only 500 followers, but this video would change everything in the next 30 minutes. The caption read, "Our national hero treated like ordinary passenger while foreigners get VIP treatment. This is wrong." Comments began pouring in immediately, with viewers expressing outrage, disbelief and demands for airline accountability. Local influencers started sharing the video to their massive followings, each repost amplifying the message exponentially. News bloggers began reaching out to Miguel for permission to use his footage in their upcoming articles. The digital wildfire was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. Emma Valdez, a flight attendant for a competing airline, saw the posts during her layover in Hong Kong. Her professional network of aviation workers began buzzing with discussions about the incident, many expressing embarrassment for their industry colleagues. "This is exactly what's wrong with how we treat our own heroes," she commented on Sarah's viral post, adding her aviation industry credentials for weight. Her comment received over 1,000 likes within 20 minutes, with fellow airline employees sharing their own stories of celebrity mistreatment. Aviation industry groups on LinkedIn began discussing the incident, with senior executives quietly taking notes for their own crisis management protocols. The story was transcending social media boundaries, entering professional circles where real decisions could be made. International flight attendants from Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand began sharing the story, turning a domestic incident into regional aviation industry news. Back on the ground, Maria Santos's phone began buzzing with notifications as her friends tagged her in the growing social media storm. Her face went pale as she realized the ordinary passenger she'd dismissed was the most beloved athlete in Philippine history. Joyce frantically refreshed her Instagram feed, watching in horror as posts about their airline's treatment of Manny Pacquiao multiplied exponentially. The check-in counter supervisor received the first angry phone call from a customer threatening to cancel their booking over the incident. Airport management began receiving notifications about the trending hashtag #RespectManny that was climbing Philippine Twitter trends. Corporate communications departments across the airline industry started monitoring the situation, recognizing a potential public relations disaster in the making. What had started as innocent passenger posts was evolving into something much larger and more dangerous for everyone involved. Ricardo de la Cruz, Senior Vice President of Customer Relations, was enjoying his morning coffee when his assistant burst through his office door with unusual urgency. "Sir, we have a massive problem with the Manila flight," she announced, her tablet displaying a cascade of angry social media posts. His perfectly organized desk, adorned with airline achievement awards, suddenly felt like a war room as the magnitude of the situation became clear. The trending hashtag, #RespectManny, had climbed to number 2 on Philippine Twitter, with over 50,000 mentions in just 30 minutes. His phone began ringing incessantly as news outlets, angry customers, and even government officials demanded explanations for the airline's treatment of the national hero. The floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manila headquarters office overlooked the very airport where this disaster had unfolded. Coffee forgotten, Ricardo realized his company was facing the worst public relations crisis in its 20-year history. Emergency meetings were called across multiple departments as executives scrambled to understand how their staff had denied first-class service to Manny Pacquiao. The conference room filled with panicked voices as marketing directors, legal advisors, and operational managers tried to piece together the incident. Security footage was immediately requested, showing the humble boxer being turned away from premium boarding despite holding a valid first-class ticket. "How did our people not recognize him?" demanded the chief marketing officer, her voice echoing off the glass walls. The airline's stock price had already dropped 2% in early trading as investors reacted to the brewing controversy. Customer service lines were flooded with cancellation requests and complaints from outraged Filipino passengers worldwide. Legal advised immediate damage control before the situation escalated beyond their ability to manage effectively. Maria Santos and Joyce Reyes were summoned to the airport manager's office, their faces drained of color as they faced immediate disciplinary action. The CCTV footage played on repeat, showing their dismissive treatment of the boxing legend who had brought international glory to their nation. "Do you understand what you've done?" the manager asked, his voice trembling with barely controlled anger and professional mortification. Both women sat in stunned silence, realizing their casual discrimination had created an international incident that threatened thousands of jobs. Human resources representatives took detailed statements, while lawyers prepared for potential lawsuits and regulatory investigations that were sure to follow. The airline's employee handbook was being rewritten in real time to prevent similar disasters in the future. Their careers, once promising and stable, now hung in the balance of public opinion and corporate accountability. Within 2 hours, the airline's board of directors convened an emergency meeting via video conference, with members joining from Singapore, Hong Kong, and Dubai. The CEO's reputation, built over decades of industry leadership, was crumbling under the weight of social media outrage and traditional news coverage. Every major Philippine news outlet had picked up the story, with international aviation publications beginning to report on the incident. Government tourism officials were questioning the airline's commitment to treating Filipino heroes with appropriate respect and dignity. Competitor airlines were privately celebrating while publicly expressing sympathy, knowing this crisis would benefit their market share significantly. The corporate communications team worked frantically to draft an apology that could satisfy an increasingly angry nation. By noon, what had started as a simple boarding denial had become a full-scale corporate emergency requiring intervention at the highest levels. ABS-CBN newsroom erupted into controlled chaos as assignment editors recognized the viral story's massive potential for national coverage. Lead anchor Karen Davila was immediately briefed on the incident, her experienced journalist instincts recognizing this as more than celebrity gossip. "Get our aviation correspondent to the airport now," she commanded, while producers scrambled to contact Manny's representatives for official statements. The network's social media team worked furiously to compile passenger videos and photos into a comprehensive timeline of events. Within 90 minutes, the story had jumped from trending hashtag to breaking news banner across all major Philippine networks. International news agencies in Hong Kong and Singapore began picking up the feed, recognizing the global interest in Pacquiao's treatment. The narrative was writing itself. Beloved national hero humiliated by his own country's airline industry. GMA Network's investigative team launched into action, assigning their best reporters to uncover the systematic issues behind this specific incident. Rappler published the first comprehensive article titled "Manny Pacquiao Denied First Class, When Airlines Forget Their Heroes," which garnered 100,000 shares within hours. CNN Philippines secured exclusive interviews with passengers who witnessed the discriminatory treatment at the check-in counter firsthand. The Philippine Star's aviation columnist began drafting an editorial about class discrimination in Filipino business practices that struck at deeper cultural issues. International sports networks, ESPN and Boxing Scene, picked up the story, framing it within Pacquiao's broader legacy and impact on global boxing. Social media engagement metrics showed this story was outperforming major political news in terms of public interest and emotional response. The incident had transcended airline news to become a commentary on respect, dignity, and national values. Television talk shows cleared their scheduled programming to discuss the broader implications of the airline's discriminatory policies and staff training failures. Radio stations across the archipelago conducted heated call-in segments, with listeners sharing their own experiences of being judged by appearance rather than merit. International Filipino communities in America, Canada, and the Middle East began organizing boycotts of the airline, demanding accountability for disrespecting their hero. The story reached morning shows in Los Angeles and New York, where Filipino-American anchors expressed personal outrage at their homeland's treatment of Pacquiao. Boxing analysts used the incident to highlight Pacquiao's humble nature and how his greatness extends far beyond athletic achievements. Tourism industry experts warned that this incident could damage the Philippines' reputation for hospitality and respect toward international visitors. The media narrative was becoming unstoppable, with each new report adding layers of complexity and national soul-searching. Government officials began responding to media inquiries, with several senators promising investigations into airline discrimination practices affecting Filipino passengers. The Department of Transportation announced an immediate review of customer service standards across all domestic carriers operating in Philippine airspace. International aviation publications questioned whether this incident reflected broader systemic issues within Southeast Asian airline customer service protocols. Social media influencers with millions of followers began creating content about respecting heroes regardless of their appearance or humble presentation. The Philippine boxing community issued collective statements supporting Pacquiao and demanding industry-wide changes to prevent similar treatment of athletes and celebrities. News conferences were scheduled by airline executives, government regulators, and consumer protection advocates, each promising accountability and reform. By evening, what began as passenger social media posts had become a full-scale national conversation about values, respect, and institutional discrimination. Flight attendant Catherine Morales watched in disbelief as economy passengers began standing in unified protest against their airline's treatment of the national hero. "This is completely unacceptable," declared Mr. Antonio Reyes, a retired school principal from Davao, his voice carrying the authority of decades spent advocating for justice. Fellow passengers nodded in agreement, their earlier excitement about meeting Pacquiao transforming into righteous indignation over the airline's discriminatory policies. The businessman who had been sitting beside Manny closed his laptop definitively and announced he would be switching airlines for all future travel. A group of overseas Filipino workers from Dubai began organizing a petition demanding immediate action and public apology from airline management. The cramped economy cabin had become a battleground for dignity, with passengers refusing to accept the status quo of class-based discrimination. Social media posts evolved from excited celebrity sightings to angry demands for corporate accountability and systemic change within the aviation industry. Maria Gonzalez, a nurse returning from Singapore, stood up and addressed the entire cabin with the passion of someone who understood service and respect. "If they can treat our greatest champion this way, how do they treat the rest of us ordinary Filipinos?" she asked pointedly. Her words resonated through the aircraft as passengers shared their own experiences of poor treatment from airline staff over the years. Several travelers began documenting the unified response, creating a powerful visual narrative of collective action inspired by their humble hero. The flight attendants found themselves caught between corporate protocols and passenger demands for immediate recognition of their mistake. Captain Rodriguez received reports from his crew about the unprecedented passenger unity developing in the economy section. Parents explained to their children why this moment was important for understanding respect, dignity, and standing up for what's right. The aircraft had become a classroom for social justice, with Manny Pacquiao serving as the unwitting catalyst for change. Students from University of the Philippines began drafting a formal complaint letter to the Civil Aeronautics Board, using their legal knowledge to frame discrimination arguments. Passengers refused to stow their phones despite crew requests, insisting on documenting this historic moment of collective resistance against institutional prejudice. A group of teachers from Mindanao started an impromptu discussion about the importance of recognizing heroes, regardless of their humble appearance or simple clothing. The elderly woman across the aisle from Manny began reciting his boxing achievements, reminding everyone why this man deserved better treatment. Business professionals shared contacts and promised to organize a formal boycott of the airline until proper reforms were implemented. The energy in the cabin was electric, with strangers becoming allies in support of their shared national hero. Flight attendants began expressing private agreement with passenger concerns, caught between their employment obligations and their personal values as proud Filipinos. As the aircraft prepared for landing, passengers organized a spontaneous standing ovation for Manny, who remained characteristically humble throughout the demonstration of support. Several travelers announced they would file formal complaints with government aviation authorities upon reaching their destination. The uprising had created lasting bonds between strangers, united by their shared respect for the champion and disgust at his treatment. Business cards were exchanged as passengers promised to stay connected in their fight for airline accountability and reform. The incident had transformed ordinary travelers into activists, determined to ensure no other Filipino hero would face similar discrimination. Social media continued buzzing with live updates from the aircraft, showing the world how a nation rallies around its champions. By the time they landed, the economy cabin passengers had become a movement, ready to demand systemic change from an industry that had forgotten its values. CEO Marcus Chen received the emergency call while attending his daughter's graduation ceremony in Singapore, his celebratory mood instantly evaporating as the crisis details unfolded. "Sir, we need you back in Manila immediately," his chief of staff urged, explaining how a simple check-in denial had exploded into international news coverage. The helicopter ride to Changi Airport felt eternal as Marcus watched his airline's reputation crumble in real time through social media feeds and news alerts. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from board members, government officials, and media outlets, demanding immediate explanations and accountability measures. The family celebration he'd planned for months was abandoned as corporate jets were arranged for his emergency return to the Philippines. 27 years of building the airline's reputation was unraveling in a matter of hours due to staff discrimination and poor training protocols. His assistant briefed him on the coordinated response plan, while private security arranged discreet transportation to avoid media confrontations at Manila Airport. Airport Operations Manager Elena Santos rushed through terminal corridors, her heels clicking urgently against polished floors as she searched for Manny Pacquiao. Security personnel helped clear a path through the growing crowd of passengers, reporters, and airline staff gathering around gate areas. "Mr. Pacquiao, sir, please accept our deepest apologies," she began breathlessly, her prepared speech forgotten in the face of his calm dignity. Behind her, a team of customer service supervisors carried first-class upgrade vouchers, luxury hotel accommodations, and other compensation packages hastily assembled by corporate headquarters. The boxing champion listened politely, but remained standing, his humble demeanor contrasting sharply with the corporate panic surrounding him. Television cameras captured every moment of the airline's desperate attempt to salvage their relationship with the Philippines' most beloved sports figure. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she realized no amount of free flights could undo the damage already spreading across social media platforms worldwide. Public Relations Director Amanda Cruz worked frantically with her team to draft an official statement that could satisfy angry customers and protect shareholder interests. "We sincerely apologize to Mr. Pacquiao and all Filipino passengers for this unacceptable lapse in our customer service standards," she wrote and rewrote multiple times. Legal advisors reviewed every word for potential liability issues, while marketing specialists calculated the financial impact of passenger boycotts and cancelled bookings. The statement needed to acknowledge wrongdoing without admitting systematic discrimination that could trigger government investigations and class action lawsuits. Social media managers prepared coordinated responses across all platforms, knowing that timing and tone would be crucial for damage control efforts. Executive assistants arranged immediate interviews with major news networks, hoping direct communication could stem the growing crisis of public confidence. The crisis communications playbook was being rewritten in real time as traditional damage control strategies proved inadequate for this unprecedented situation. Maria Santos and Joyce Reyes sat in the airport manager's office signing termination letters while news crews gathered outside the building. Their careers in aviation were effectively over, casualties of a discrimination incident that had exposed systemic problems within airline customer service training. "This decision is effective immediately," the Human Resources Director announced, hoping swift action might demonstrate corporate commitment to accountability and reform. Upper management knew that firing the frontline staff was insufficient, but necessary for showing decisive leadership during the developing crisis. The women's photos were already circulating on social media as symbols of institutional prejudice that extended far beyond airline industry practices. Union representatives arrived to support the terminated employees, while lawyers prepared for potential wrongful termination lawsuits that could complicate the situation further. Meanwhile, Manny Pacquiao himself remained focused on forgiveness rather than punishment, his gracious response serving as a stark contrast to corporate panic and media sensationalism. Philippine Department of Education Secretary Dr. Leonor Briones seized the moment, issuing a nationwide memo encouraging teachers to use the incident as a classroom discussion topic. "This situation teaches our children that greatness comes in humble packages," she wrote to school principals across the archipelago's 47,000 public schools. Teachers in Manila, Cebu, and Davao began incorporating the story into their values education lessons, showing students that respect should never depend on appearance. High school students analyzed the incident in their social studies classes, debating the deeper implications of discrimination and prejudice in modern Filipino society. Elementary teachers used age-appropriate versions to explain why judging people by their clothes or status was fundamentally wrong and harmful. The incident became a powerful teaching tool about looking beyond surface appearances to recognize true character and achievement. Educational television programs rushed to produce special segments featuring the story as an example of why humility and respect matter more than wealth or status. University professors across the Philippines began using the incident as a case study in their sociology, business ethics, and communications courses. Professor Maria Elena Santos at Ateneo de Manila University assigned her students to analyze how social media transformed a simple discriminatory act into a national conversation. Students examined the power dynamics between service providers and customers, questioning how appearance-based assumptions affect treatment in various industries beyond aviation. Business schools incorporated the crisis into their customer service management curricula, showing how discrimination can destroy corporate reputations within hours. Philosophy departments explored the ethical implications of judging human worth based on clothing, possessions, or perceived social status. The academic community recognized this incident as a perfect, real-world example of how prejudice operates in everyday interactions. Research papers began emerging within weeks, analyzing the sociological impact of the event on Filipino national consciousness and identity. Religious leaders from Catholic, Protestant, and Islamic communities used the incident in their sermons about humility, dignity, and treating others with Christ-like compassion. Father Miguel Rodriguez at Manila Cathedral told his congregation, "Manny Pacquiao showed us how to respond to injustice with grace and forgiveness." Pastors in evangelical churches across Mindanao praised the boxer's humble acceptance of discrimination as an example of Christian character under pressure. Islamic leaders in southern Philippines emphasized how true strength comes from maintaining dignity when facing unfair treatment and prejudice. Sunday school teachers created lessons showing children how Manny's quiet response demonstrated more power than anger or retaliation could ever achieve. The interfaith community found common ground in celebrating the boxer's exemplary behavior as a model for their own congregations. Religious social media accounts shared inspirational messages about the incident, reinforcing spiritual values of humility, forgiveness, and treating everyone with equal respect. Parents nationwide used the story as a bedtime conversation starter, helping their children understand why appearance doesn't determine a person's worth or deserve respectful treatment. Remember how Kuya Manny stayed kind even when people were mean to him? Mothers asked their young children before sleep. Family dinner conversations evolved into discussions about treating school janitors, security guards, and service workers with the same respect given to wealthy neighbors. Children began questioning their own assumptions about classmates from different economic backgrounds, inspired by their hero's example of grace under pressure. The incident sparked intergenerational dialogues about values, with grandparents sharing stories of their own experiences with discrimination and prejudice. Filipino families abroad use the story to teach their children about maintaining dignity and cultural values regardless of their circumstances. The boxing champion had inadvertently become the Philippines' most effective teacher of humility, respect, and human dignity in modern times. Manny Pacquiao stood quietly in the airport's VIP lounge, now hastily arranged by desperate airline executives seeking to salvage their reputation. His weathered hands held a simple cup of coffee as reporters surrounded him, microphones extended like weapons in a media battlefield. "Hindi ako galit," he said softly in Filipino, his voice carrying the same calm that had steadied him through 8 weight divisions. The cameras captured every nuance of his expression as he explained that anger would serve no purpose in this situation. His simple white polo shirt, the same one that had caused staff to dismiss him hours earlier, now seemed to glow with quiet dignity. Behind him, airline officials fidgeted nervously, their expensive suits contrasting sharply with his humble appearance and genuine character. The boxer's response would define not just this incident, but his lasting legacy as a leader who chose forgiveness over retribution. "Patawarin natin sila," Manny continued, suggesting forgiveness for the airline staff who had discriminated against him based on his modest appearance. His words sent shockwaves through the assembled media, who had expected anger or demands for accountability from the mistreated champion. "We all make mistakes, and they are also just working people trying to do their jobs," he explained with characteristic empathy. The reporters exchanged glances, recognizing they were witnessing something extraordinary in an age of celebrity outrage and social media vengeance. His humility transformed the narrative from corporate crisis to national inspiration, showing millions of Filipinos how true champions respond to injustice. The airline executives behind him looked visibly relieved, though they knew their company's reputation still hung in the balance. Social media exploded with admiration for Pacquiao's gracious response, with hashtags like #WeChampionHeart and #TargetTrueGreatness trending alongside the original criticism. The boxing legend's gentle words about understanding and forgiveness spread across international news networks, reaching audiences far beyond the Philippines. His response became a masterclass in leadership, showing how genuine strength comes from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. "I hope this incident helps us all remember to treat each other with kindness," he concluded, his message resonating with viewers worldwide. The airline's stock price, which had plummeted during the crisis, began recovering as investors recognized the power of Pacquiao's gracious response. Government officials praised his handling of the situation, noting how his reaction brought honor to the nation rather than division or bitterness. International boxing analysts wrote columns about how Pacquiao's greatest victory had nothing to do with defeating opponents in the ring. His response transformed a moment of corporate discrimination into a global lesson about dignity, forgiveness, and the true meaning of championship character. As evening fell over Manila, Manny Pacquiao walked through the same airport where his ordeal had begun, now accompanied by the respect he had always deserved. Airline staff bowed respectfully as he passed, having learned firsthand that greatness often comes disguised in humble packaging. The incident had sparked nationwide conversations about prejudice, respect, and the importance of looking beyond appearances to recognize true worth. His gracious handling of discrimination had inadvertently created a more beautiful story than any public relations campaign could have designed. Children across the Philippines fell asleep to bedtime stories about their hero who chose kindness over anger when faced with unfair treatment. The airline implemented comprehensive sensitivity training programs, ensuring future staff would recognize that champions come in all forms and deserve universal respect. In transforming personal injustice into national inspiration, Manny Pacquiao had once again proven why he remains the Philippines' greatest champion, both inside and outside the boxing ring. Manny Pacquiao's graceful response to discrimination reminds us that true champions are defined not by how they fight, but by how they forgive. His humility transformed injustice into inspiration, proving that greatness lies in character, not status. What did you think of Manny's response? Subscribe and share your thoughts below.